Hello everyone and welcome to Cinderfall Gaming. I hope you're all doing well, I hope you're all staying safe, and most of all, I hope you're all fighting that war against the Grey. Today's video is a video where we're going to look at the best and worst armies in Age of Sigmar 3rd edition at the current point in time. Now, I know we haven't had a lot of games, a lot of tournaments and all that jazz right now, but I want to give some thoughts and some ideas on what I personally think the best and worst armies are in the game based on my own experiences and from the experiences I've talked about with my friends that have been able to play the game as well, and generally what I hear and see people talking about online. Now, it is worth mentioning that the best does not mean the best always. There's definitely ways to lose with the best armies, though maybe some of these armies give you a few crutches to help you stand up on, and maybe some of these worst armies actually can be really good when piloted by a really good player who understands the faction. It should also be worth noting as well now at the point that a worst army does not mean you should not get them. A good army and a good general can lead any army to victory. I've seen people almost win tournaments with some of the worst armies in the game at times. I've seen people do really well on consistent bases with terrible armies. I've done so myself with a terrible army for quite a while as well. Anyway, that's enough rambling. Let's get into the list, and we're going to start with the best armies. So this is going to be the best and worst 5 armies in Age of Sigmar 3rd edition. Number 1, the Disciples of Tzeentch. Now, Tzeentch straight away has just been a really good army for a while now, especially in the latter parts of Age of Sigmar 2nd edition, and it goes into a really strong place in 3rd edition. Pink Horrors are as good as they always were. They're a tar pit unit that is just so hard to remove off the table. Tzeentch is able to throw out a ton of mortal wounds, which is a great way of getting around the now free access to a +1 save from command abilities and stuff like that. You've also got access to quite a lot of rend as well in your army, getting rid of that +1 save benefit throughout most of your army. And you've got some really cool tricks as well with Tzeentch. Things like particular subfactions not allowing opponents to retreat, really sort of bogging them down. And you've also got some other cool effects there. Things like Kairos, who's a fantastic wizard, able to really do some damage and change dice rolls to his favor. Khaine is also a massive part of what makes this faction great. The Grand Marshal of the Apocalypse is absolutely fantastic inside a Tzeentch army. He can use those destiny dice to ensure that things end up living inside his sword as he steals their souls. Not only that, can just generally, against the things that are going to potentially hurt him, use destiny dice to sort of palm them off and make them not affect him that much at all. Number 2, Kharadron Overlords. We thought the shooting meta might end a little bit, and maybe perhaps to a level it has. However, Kharadron Overlords I think remain extremely competitive in the game. What makes them so competitive is they're really good at taking on the other top tier competitive armies. Kharadron will generally get bogged down by armies you might not think them actually losing against. They'll generally lose to, lower table armies, but do really well against the big hitters in the game. They don't care about facing off against Teclis or Archaon. They will just shoot that person off the table, and they're pretty good at shooting most things off the table in general. It's those lower armies that don't really have any high priority targets, where the Kharadron Overlords can't really focus fire to bring down any one part of the army, that they really do suffer. And maybe that is a thing in the new edition, and maybe we'll see Kharadron Overlords drop off this list maybe potentially over the next edition. But at the meantime, I think they're really great. Unleash Hell with Thunderers is amazing. The fact you can take them as battle line in one of the sub-factions is really great as well. This is the one I'm not entirely sure on. Maybe because I do play against a rather good Kharadron Overlords player when I play against Kharadron Overlords, and my experiences talking about them with him are generally quite positive. I do think, though, they are a really great army. They've got maneuverability. They've got the ability to have multiple small units. They don't really care about the whole rules with enhancing your units and making your units larger, reinforcement points and the such. And they also don't really care about most of the other things. Triumphs did affect them, but getting rerolls to wound on all those guns now is absolutely amazing. So they've got a little bit extra in those triumphs as well, which is awesome. Number 3, Lumineth Realm-Lords. Another army that ended the previous edition in a really strong place. Lumineth Realm-Lords coming to the new edition or staying in that really strong place they were in. They have a pretty much army-wide -1 to hit ability with all the Venari units in the Shining Company. They've got a great wizard in Teclis and, well, the spell doms that they have, these dominant spellcasters that the army have, can just absolutely tear opponents' armies asunder. And not only that, Lumineth have really great defensive spell ability as well. Things like the Cathalar are going to be really important for Lumineth going forward, but it is a really great asset for the army to have, allowing them to get extra battle shock testing knowledge. You can use Inspiring Presence on one unit, shift another test back onto an opponent's unit with the Cathalar, and really work around playing around some of these things that are maybe more apparent for no armies now. Particular parts of the Lumineth army did go up in points, but definitely not enough. You also saw things like the Venari Wardens go up a lot, while the Sentinels did not. And this means, you know, cheap, smaller units of Wardens with large units of Sentinels is definitely a thing still. And you'll see plenty of those bow-wielding Lumineth Realm-Lords on the table. They've also got access to some really great hero monsters. Avalanor, while he went up in points, is still absolutely amazing on the tabletop. And you've got of course, all the wind charges and all the new Huracan Temple stuff, including those flying foxes that they have, that are just absolutely annoying for your opponents to have to deal with, and can just do so much on the table. While not doing a lot of damage with those particular models, they will just harass and do all manner of things to your opponent, annoying them and making them get so frustrated. Number 4, Daughters of Khaine. An amazing army in the game, one of the most powerful combat armies in the game, and an access to a ton of mortal wounds through the various types of Melusai units in the army. They also have some really cool shooting pieces now. Both the Bloodrack Medusa and the Bloodrack Shrine definitely look to be on the up with their ability to do mortal wounds as a shooting attack, can also be really useful as a Unleash Hell ability. I've seen that go off, and boy, it could be nasty. You've also got access to the generic Witch Elves, which have run well for quite some time. They don't really care about being in large blocks because a unit of 10 or 20 of these will get to fight with most of its models and put out an absolute ton of attacks. You've also got access to some good priests that have really easy to cast prayers, generally on 3s, and you've also got some really high rend on them, enabling you to get through some of the potential high armor saves you're going to see. You've also got one of the best models in the entire game in Morathi. She's just an absolute beatstick, can do a lot of magical potential and be a really great spellcaster, while also being an absolute powerful frontline fighting piece as well. Daughters of Khaine just are in a really good space. They have a whole host of different things they can do. A true toolkit army that can work well in nearly every phase of the game. And lucky last, number 5 on our list of the top armies in Age of Sigmar at the moment, we have Seraphon. Seraphon are probably the best army in the game, or at least were the best army in the game. Whether or not they still hold a top spot, I think is up for debate, but at a point in Age of Sigmar 2nd edition, they certainly were the undisputed top dogs of the game. They do still fight really well. Maybe they've fallen down the pecking order a little bit. It's still a little bit too early to tell how far they've fallen, but definitely I still think they rank as one of the top 5 armies in the game. What's even better is some of the things that actually benefited Seraphon. While they may be lost in some aspects due to not being able to take such large units of skinks in a multitude anymore, they definitely made up for it in the gains the army got for monsters. I think all the monster things that came into the game now just benefit Seraphon so much and help raise them back up for the things they maybe probably lost with the start of the new edition in other ways. But Seraphon, their monsters, they've got really tough, durable monsters all over with some really good damage potential from them all as well. Definitely at range as well as combat. And I think they're just in a really good place. -1 damage and the ability to stack up those armor saves and get +1 to save on a ton of these big monsters is just amazing. It's really going to make Seraphon armies really, really survivable in the new edition. I think this is going to be a key thing for them going forward. Let's not forget as well, we have things like the Slan Mage Priest and Lord Croak in the Seraphon army as well. We haven't even mentioned them yet, and they're really good spellcasters both offensively and defensively. And number 1 in our worst armies in Age of Sigmar at the moment, we have Beasts of Chaos. Beasts of Chaos do lack a few different things. They have no real true hammers within the army. The Doomballs and Bestigors, which are, I guess, the heaviest hitters in the army, definitely don't hit all that hard, or at least not in comparison to other heavy hitters in other armies. They do have a lot of bodies on the table, though. With the smaller board size, they do need less of them on the table now, so that's not as big a deal. You can sort of play around and block out the Beastmen from blocking you out. Their monsters also are generally not all that flash hot. They probably need, for in general, just a whole bunch of model updates for units to get some new updates, some new rules, and just something more. Gores are particularly bad. Even though they've got the rerollable charges now, it's still not the greatest unit on the table, though I think with a few extra little changes to them, they could be really good. Beasts of Chaos are an army, I think, while they may be in the worst armies at the moment, are definitely an army on the rise. Given the right sort of updates throughout the edition, I think they could be really good, but at the moment they just don't have that hitting potential to actually do the damage that's needed to be done to ensure you're getting battle tactics off every turn. Number 2 in our worst armies, Sylvaneth. Sylvaneth, I think, are hurt more by the fundamental changes to the game and just the very basics of the game now, that more than anything in their army per se. They did see points drops on a couple of heroes, though did see hikes on others, but for me, I think the big thing for this is coherency that really hurts Sylvaneth. They have a lot of models in 5-man units that generally suffer because of their short weapon range. Things like the Spite Revenants and Tree Revenants definitely get hurt by this. Dryads as well, while they have a 2-inch range, being 32mm bases, definitely doesn't help them getting reinforcement points, but it is better than the Tree Revenants and the Spite Revenants. They've also got Kurnoth Hunters, which come in 3 model units, which is another one that doesn't lead to being reinforced really well, though the swords generally lose their option to be the larger units, but scythes can definitely work in 6s, and you've also got the ability to have the bows in 6s as well, because you don't really care at that point. Some of their abilities did change as well. The Kurnoth Hunters lost their rerollable saves for a +1 save, and they've also just suffered a bit. I think Alariel's new War Scroll, while awesome and great, definitely is really high on the points end value of things, and generally a lot of things in Sylvaneth seem to be on the high end of points, despite not maybe being the highest damage dealers in the army. They have a lot of models that can either do amazing or not, and a lot of models take damage and take some penalties for taking the damage. Things like Durthu, especially, who goes from just flat 6 damage to D6 for just taking a few wounds on his profile. Sylvaneth also have the ability now where they can't see through their own forests, as the current FAQ states with the trees at the moment, so that needs to be changed for certain, but it is worth noting that all this could be changed in the FAQ. I think Sylvaneth definitely have a chance to be on the rise. They've got some cool hero monsters that have some really good saves that definitely can take advantage of Finest Hour and some of the command abilities, but they definitely need some helps with their troops. Number 3, Gloomspite Gitz. A few of the just basic changes to the game, like Sylvaneth, hurt this army more than anything. The ability to have units reinforced and some of the unit sizes they have standard definitely hurt the Gloomspite Gitz. Things like their units of Squigs, and particularly Boingrot Bounders, now not having to spend those reinforcement points to get them up to a 10 model unit. That's when they're going to be the most effective, or having to spend 2 reinforcement points to get that unit of 60 stabbers in there as well. They also, while they have some cool monsters like the Mangler Squigs and stuff like that, they also don't have monsters in the Troggoths. The fact that Troggoths aren't monsters, I think, is a massive harm to Gloomspite Gitz, and I think just that simple change there would be great. They also generally lack the damage output, and the fact they can't stack abilities, and they also can't stack minus to penalties to hit, which was a massive Gloomspite Gitz strategy, is definitely something that hurts the army in general. A new book for Gloomspite Gitz is definitely needed to sort of spread out those buffs and not make the army reliant on this sort of pile-on debuff potential playstyle that it has in previous editions is needed, just to sort of make the army work that little bit better in the new edition. There are some nice changes. Things like Squig Hoppers going to 10-man units as their basic size was a nice change, but all in all, I don't think Gloomspite saw enough positive changes to outrank their negative changes, and they sort of stay at that same sort of point of maybe not the worst army in the game, but definitely playing around those bottom of the armies. Number 4, Hedonites of Slaanesh. Boy, oh boy, has this army paid the price for the sins of the past. For those who've been playing Age of Sigmar for a while, you'll know all the stories about how Slaanesh were probably the most oppressive and overpowered army to have ever existed in Warhammer Age of Sigmar at a single point in time. Now, have the tables changed. Slaanesh just see them getting hit with points increases, rules debuffs, and everything time and time again. Their new army just doesn't work in any fun sort of way, I think. They are generally one of the armies that doesn't have a playstyle sort of playing how you want, and if you sort of push into particular facets of the army, it makes for an unfair playstyle. Slaanesh just need a bit of help. They did have some cool units in the new edition before we saw all the changes to a bunch of war scrolls, and I think we're just generally going to need to see a lot of love and a lot of points decreases for Slaanesh, that being the biggest thing that needs to happen. There are some decent rules throughout the army, though points just massively hinder the army. Slaanesh is just way overcosted as an army. Nearly every one of the units could come down about 30 or 40% and you'd be somewhere in the right ballpark, I think. More than any other army, points changes could definitely help this army regain some of its former glory if you just saw decreases in a few pieces around the table. They're a glass cannon army that pays for troops like their heavy elite infantry, and it shows on the tabletop as they just can't withstand a prolonged fight. Getting stuck into any sort of long fight is not a good day for Slaanesh. Number 5, Nighthaunt. One change more than any I think has hurt Nighthaunt, and that is the reinforcement points coming into the game. Nighthaunt relied on having most of their units at very high numbers of models, and this is massively hurt with the reinforcement points. Chain Rasps don't survive long enough in some of the unit sizes they're now having to be taken into, and their elite units, because of having to bulk up those Chain Rasps into larger units, are suffering because of it. They've got a lot of units that generally just can't hit the numbers they need to in their units, because otherwise your Chain Rasps don't get the effectiveness to bog down your opponent like they should be. And in general, they do lack any monsters, which the new edition is especially kind towards. The problem with this as well is, while there are other armies in the game that don't have monsters, namely, let's look at KO as an example, they have ways to deal with monsters in great abundance. Nighthaunt do not. They just generally lack all the tools to sort of fulfill the roles of the new game. Flyer, where it once was great, being able to fly across the battlefield and ignore terrain, generally isn't as great anymore because the battlefield has shrunk about 23% in size, so that doesn't help them as much as it once did. Coherency rules and all of that make the sort of over-the-top piling in and stuff like that, and when your opponent's fighting in two ranks, much harder to perform those sort of maneuvers whilst remaining in your own coherency bubbles. And generally, I think Nighthaunt just suffer a lot from not having enough damage potential and not enough mortal wounds within their ranks. So what are your thoughts and ideas on what are the best and what are the worst armies at current in Age of Sigmar? It is certainly early days for the new edition, and I think this video will serve as something to look back on and sort of give me a point of reference into where I'm thinking into the rest of Age of Sigmar in the new edition. It's always fun to go back and look how terribly wrong you were or how right you were. So let's see how wrong and right I am as we look forward to the future of Age of Sigmar. And once again, I'd love to hear your thoughts and your ideas on what you think is doing great and what's not quite so hot at the moment, what needs a new book, what needs new rules and stuff like that, and what just needs minor changes. Let us know in the comments below. Well, thank you all for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Also, while you're at it, why not come chat more with us on Discord? We've got a link in the description of the video below to our Discord server. You can come chat with me and other members of our fine little community here at Sinful Gaming. Lastly, we'd like to give a shout out to everyone who helps support the channel in various different ways. First of all, to our Patreon members, Christian Weir, James Soren, Chaos Spawn, AJC, Kenny Lowe, Outer and Shot First, James Crowder, Andrew Bowen, Nathan Fee, Tim Newman, The Rising Ape, Cure Dynamic, Agu, Anthony B, MJ, and Dyna226. Thank you to, as well, our YouTube members, Green Roots Gaming, Fire Titan, Steve T, The Real Zeot, Chris Wallace, Turiot12, Vinny, and Loch Lorick. And a special thanks to our artist who does all the channel art for us, Lady Witchfox Art, thank you very much. And to our Discord moderator, Xmorphic, you do a fantastic job on Discord for us as well. Thank you all, everyone, for watching. If you'd like to help support on Patreon or YouTube member or help support the channel in another way, you can do so by following one of the links in the description of the video to Patreon or YouTube members, or go buy some Sinful Gaming merch from our Teespring store, also linked in the video's description. That's it for today, everyone. Thank you again. Stay safe, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the Grey. Ciao for now.